Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time tuning in, I ask you to do three things: to like, comment, and subscribe. I also ask you to hit the notification bell so you're notified every time I upload a video. The reason why I ask you to like, comment, and subscribe is because the more you interact with the video, the more YouTube will promote this video, and this will help us get the gospel of Jesus Christ worldwide. Happy Tuesday. I have a couple of questions to ask you. My first question to you is, how many of us are tired of waiting on God? My second question to you is, how many of us are starting to become impatient with God? And my third question to you is, how many of us are willing to choose the counterfeit? Let me submit to you, do not choose Ishmael. I say one more time, do not choose Ishmael. Some of y'all are probably asking yourself, who's Ishmael? How did he get into the picture? Let me give you some historical context. Ishmael was the son birthed to Abraham through Hagar, the slave of Sarah, who is Abraham's wife. Ishmael represented impatience, Ishmael represented cutting corners, and Ishmael represented a lack of trust in the promise God gave Abraham and Sarah. My question is, are you choosing something or someone because of your impatience? I'm going to ask that question one more time. Are you choosing someone or something because of your impatience? How many of us say this? I know God said I was going to get married to someone who serves him, but God's taking too long, so I'm just going to settle for this relationship. How many of us say this? I know God said my family members would be saved, but I'm praying, I see no results, so I'm just going to give up on the promise God gave me. How many of us have said this? I know God said I was going to start my own business, but it's getting too hard. I'm going to settle in this job because of job security. Let me tell you right now, don't you dare give up. Don't you dare give in on what God has promised for you. God's promises are yes and amen. And just because the promise is taking its time to manifest does not mean the promise is not on its way. So in this life, do not choose impatience. Do not choose the counterfeit. Do not choose Ishmael. Choose the promise God gave you when no one was around. The promise will come to pass no matter what. The only reason the promise will not come to pass is because you decided to give up in the middle of the process. Isaiah 55 verse 10 to 11 says, the rain and snow come down from the heavens and stay on the ground to water the earth. They cause the grain to grow, producing seed for the farmer and bread for the hungry. It is the same with my word. I send it out and it always produces fruit. It will accomplish all I want it to, and it will prosper everywhere I send it. When God sends out his promises, it will always accomplish what it's supposed to do if we choose to be patient and not settle for the counterfeit. Genesis chapter 16 verse 1 to 3 says, now Sarai, this is Sarah, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai told Abram, the Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her. And Abram agreed with Sarai's proposal. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. This was 10 years after God told Abraham that he was going to become a great nation. This was 10 years after God told him that whoever blessed him will be blessed, whoever cursed him will be cursed. This was 10 years after the time God said through him, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. But it seems like after 10 years of frustration, after 10 years of no results, after 10 years of despair, Sarah had in her mind that she was going to help God. She said Abraham should go sleep with her servant so God can keep his promise. Let me tell you right now, God does not need our help to keep his promises. All he needs from us is a willing heart and obedience. I believe the funniest thing we can do is give God our recommendations and our suggestions. God does not need our recommendations. God does not need our suggestions. God knows the end from the beginning. He does not need our wisdom. He does not need our intellect. I'm here to tell you right now, all he needs from us is a willing heart and obedience. If you look back at verse 3, it tells us how Hagar was an Egyptian. If you fast forward 4 generations, you will see that it was the same Egyptians that would enslave the descendants of Abraham for 400 years. So what am I trying to tell you? Most of the times when we choose impatience or if we choose to counterfeit, it can lead us to being bound and lead to our future generations being bound. Also, if you look at the fighting that's happening right now in the Middle East, it's usually the people of the Jewish descent against the people of Muslim descent. And if you didn't know, the Jewish people came from Isaac, the promised child, and the Muslim descent came from Ishmael, the son of Hagar. So the wars in the Middle East is happening because Sarah got impatient and wanted to help God. Do not choose Ishmael because of your impatience, because your impatience can lead you to battles that you're never meant to fight. If we continue with Genesis chapter 16, verse 4 to 5, it says, so Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress Sarai with contempt. Then Sarai said to Abram, this is all your fault. Pause. This was not Abram's idea. This was Sarai's idea. So I don't know why Sarah is blaming Abraham. But let's continue. I put my servant in your arms, but now that she's pregnant, she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show who's wrong, you or me. Like I said, I know Abraham was looking like this was your idea. But this is what happens when we choose the counterfeit. First, the counterfeit will look at you with contempt, with disregard, and with disrespect, just like Hagar looked at Sarah. But look what happens afterwards. Sarah then proceeds to blame Abraham for her idea. When you are impatient and make a decision, when the decision does not turn out to what you thought it would be, you will start blaming everyone but yourself. People will say, I'm acting like this because my boss took advantage of my skills. But did God tell you to work there? Or did you just get taught on waiting on God? Some people also say that I'm act this way because the way my ex treated me. But did God tell you to leave your season of singleness? Or did you just get impatient with God and then you just started with all your friends, you started seeing all your friends' relationships and you started to hop in a relationship? Please do not make decisions out of your impatience, because then you would choose to blame everyone because of the results of your decision. Be patient with God and do not choose Ishmael. Hebrews 10 verse 36 says, patient endurance is what you need now, so that you will continue to do God's will. Then you will receive all that he promised. If we continue with Genesis chapter 16 verse 6, it says, Abram replied, look, she's your servant, so deal with her as you see fit. Then Sarai treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. When you choose not to wait on God, you will start to mistreat your decision. The decision you made in your impatience is what you will start to mistreat. So before you make any decisions, please make sure that you're not making a decision that can work against the promise God gave you. So after being treated so badly by Sarah, Hagar ran away, but she encountered an angel, and the angel told her to go back and submit to the authority of Sarah. But the angel also told Hagar what type of child her son was going to be. If we go to Genesis chapter 16 verse 12, it says, this son of yours will be a wild man, as untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fist against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all his relatives. The decisions you make due to impatience can cause hostility and tension. Please do not make any decision because you're tired of waiting. God's promises are worth the wait. We have to be the generation that waits on the Lord. We can't get ahead of God, because if we get ahead of God, it's a guarantee that we will lead ourselves to destruction. Do not pick the counterfeit. Pick the covenant. I'm going to say that one more time. Do not pick the counterfeit. Pick the covenant. I did not say pick convenient. I'm going to say that. I didn't say pick convenient. I say pick the covenant. And the covenant means just agreement with God. So we continue. Hagar gives birth to Ishmael when Abraham was 86 years old. And for 14 years, they treated the counterfeit like the promise. Please do not get so blinded or jaded that you cannot tell the difference between the promise and the counterfeit. Please do not get so impatient that you forget the promises God has given you and you decide to settle for good enough. For 14 years, they tricked themselves to believing that Ishmael was the promised child. But even if we forget the promises of God in our lives, God does not forget the promises he has given us. If you look at Genesis chapter 18, God visited Abraham and Sarah and reminded them of the promise he gave them. And then also he gave them a timeline. He said, by this time next year, I will come and visit you, and you will have a son. I don't know who needs to hear this. I don't know who needs to claim this by faith. But by this time next year, you will be healed. By this time next year, you will be restored. By this time next year, you will be freed. By this time next year, you will own your own business. By this time next year, you will be debt free. By this time next year, you will have your children. By this time next year, your friends and family will be serving Jesus. By this time next year, in Jesus' mighty name. So we continue. Sarah has the baby, names him Isaac, which just means laughter. Everything's good until the counterfeit started causing trouble or causing problem with the promise. Genesis chapter 21 verse 8 to 13 says, when Isaac grew up and was about to be weaned, Abraham prepared a huge feast to celebrate the occasion. But Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and her Egyptian servant Hagar making fun of her son Isaac. So she turned to Abraham and demanded, get rid of that slave woman and her son. He is not going to share the inheritance with my son Isaac. I won't have it. This upset Abraham very much because Ishmael was his son. Please do not get upset because of the counterfeit. Don't get upset because the counterfeit was your idea. I know you've grown so close to the counterfeit. I know you've grown accustomed to the counterfeit, but do not let the counterfeit distract you from the promise God has given you. Verse 12 says, but God told Abraham, don't be upset over the boy and your servant. Do whatever Sarah tells you, for Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted. God told Abraham to send away Ishmael. Why? I believe it's because the counterfeit and the promise cannot grow in the same space. I said that one more time. In my opinion, I believe that the counterfeit and the promise cannot grow in the same space. So I'm asking you to take inventory of your life. See what is in your life that is a counterfeit. Because if there's counterfeits in your life, you may get distracted by them and not focus on the promises God has already given you. It might hurt to let them go. But I'm telling you right now, if you want to see the fulfillment of the promises of God in your life, let them go. I want to leave you with this verse. Deuteronomy chapter 30 verse 19. It says, today I've given you the choice between life and death, between blessings and curses. Now I call on heaven and earth to witness the choice you make. Oh, that you would choose life so that you and your descendants might live. So when you have a choice between the promise God has given you and the counterfeit that you came up with by yourself, please choose the promise God gave you. Because remember, the counterfeit will only lead to frustration, destruction, and regret. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. I upload every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I don't want you to miss out on any of the content coming out of this channel. If you have any prayer requests, put in the comment section below. I love you. God bless you. And I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching this video. If you want more content, subscribe over here and watch the next video over there. God bless you.